Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not swashbuckling through a tavern with a pistol on your hip and a grin on your lips. You're not Anne Bonny, not Mary Read, and certainly not the heroine of some romantic high seas adventure. No, tonight you're a woman, poor, forgotten and inconvenient, and you've made the fatal mistake of stepping onto a pirate ship during the golden age of piracy. Maybe you thought you'd find freedom. What you'll actually find is rot, betrayal, lice and a noose. But not all at once. That would be merciful. Before you're flogged, forgotten or fed to the ocean, do me a small favour. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I find it fascinating to see who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more of these quietly devastating bedtime stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You're born into damp linens and disappointment, maybe in a crooked little shack on the edge of a marsh, where the water rises too fast and the food rots too slow. Maybe in a teeming port town, somewhere the ships roll in with silk and silver, and roll out again just as easily with people like you in the cargo hold. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're a girl, and that means the world isn't here for you. You don't have a name anyone remembers. Maybe you were named after a saint or a grandmother, or a word someone misheard. But most days, you're just girl, or you, or whatever a man needs to yell when he's angry and doesn't want to hit a wall. You're not the first child, and you won't be the last, but you might be the hungriest. By the time you're 5, you've learned how to chew stale bread without crying. By 7, you've learned how to eat in silence. By 9, you've learned not to ask for more. There is no more. You learn early that men don't have to be cruel to be dangerous. They can be tired, or drunk, or just bored. That's enough. Your father might hit you. Your brother might sell you. Your uncle might forget you exist until someone points out your chest is coming in. The women in your life do what they can, but they're already drowning in their own small griefs. A mother who pretends she doesn't see. A neighbour who looks away. A sister who runs and doesn't come back. No one tells you what the world is. They assume you'll find out on your own. And you do. There's work, of course. There's always work. You carry buckets. You sweep floors. You haul slop and water and whatever else needs moving. You do it with bleeding fingers and cracked lips and an empty belly. It never pays. Not really. A few coins if you're lucky. A heel of bread if you're not. And if you're too slow or too weak or too sick, someone else takes your place. There's always someone more desperate than you. At least for now. When your body starts changing, the rules change too. The stares start first, then the comments, then the touches that pretend to be accidents. You try to hide under layers, but it doesn't matter. Fabric doesn't stop hands. And no one ever seems to blame the hand, just the girl. You start to walk faster, keep your eyes down, make yourself small. It doesn't help. It never helps. You're not a person anymore. You're a resource, a future wife, a future mother, a future body to be used and traded and discarded. You hear stories sometimes, stories of women who escaped, ran away to sea, disguised themselves as boys, took up the sword. You cling to those stories like a splintered bit of driftwood. Not because you believe them, but because you want to. Because it's easier than believing this is all there is. But even the stories are cruel. The women who survive are always beautiful, always clever, always somehow still desirable at the end. That won't be you. Religion is no comfort. God, if he sees you, doesn't do much about it. You sit in church when you're allowed. Listen to men in robes talk about virtue and obedience and Eve's great sin. You stop asking questions after a priest boxes your ear for calling Lot's daughters clever. Your prayers are quiet now, mostly wishes for rain or bread or for someone to choke on the words, "You'll understand when you're older." You never get older, not really, just more tired. Puberty is less a transformation and more a betrayal. Your hips ache. Your blood comes, men notice. You stop being allowed near the docks without a chaperone. Not that you ever had one. You learn to count coins with your legs crossed and your back to the wall. You learn how to run in skirts. You learn that no is only a real answer when it comes from a man. And you learn, the hard way, that some men don't wait for answers at all. Your first proposal comes from a man 3 times your age. He has a goat, a limp, and 4 missing teeth. Your family considers it. A goat is a goat, but you refuse, not because you're brave, but because you're not ready to give up the idea that something better might exist. That's the worst part, really. The hope. It lingers like a bruise, never deep enough to kill, just enough to keep hurting. You think about running. Everyone does. You dream of warm places and wide roads. You imagine boarding a ship and never coming back. But you've never seen the sea. You don't know anyone with a boat. You don't have a map, you don't have shoes. So you stay. Because staying feels safer than failing somewhere else. Because you don't know yet that both end the same way. The moment of change doesn't feel like a moment at all. It creeps in like mildew. One day, you're scrubbing laundry for a woman who pinches your cheeks and calls you dear, and the next you're staring at your own reflection in muddy water and wondering if your face is the sort men would kill or spare. You hear another ship dock. You hear the sailors shouting. You hear the stories of gold and freedom and places where no one knows your name. And you think maybe, just maybe, you won't be missed. Not really. Someone might notice your chores haven't been done. Someone might ask if you've run off with a boy. Someone might shake their head and mutter about wild girls with no sense of duty. But no one will search. No one will put up signs. No one will remember you the next season, when the frost sets in and the slop freezes in the buckets. You'll just be another girl who vanished. And the truth is that's what you already are. A body not yet buried. A name not yet forgotten. You've been vanishing for years, one scraped knee at a time. One bite withheld, one promise broken. So when the chance comes, when a ship's cook offers you a place on board, in exchange for silence, obedience, and maybe a few other things you'd rather not think about, you don't hesitate. Not because you believe you'll be safe, not because you think you'll be free, but because you already know the truth. You're nobody. And nobody cares. It doesn't feel like a decision. There's no dramatic moment, no wind in your hair, no slow motion glance back at the life you're leaving behind. There's just a man with bad teeth and a stained coat saying he knows a ship looking for extra help. He's not the kind of man you trust, but he's also not the kind you can afford to ignore. You've seen him around the docks, barking at boys and pocketing coins that aren't his. You think he might be a cook or a boatswain or just another liar, but he talks to you like you matter, like you're capable of more than hauling water and dodging slaps, and that's a rare thing. So you listen, and when he says, they need someone who doesn't ask questions, someone who can keep quiet and scrub decks and maybe take a few knocks without whining, you nod. He doesn't mention pay. You don't ask. You tell yourself it's temporary, just until the next port, just until you've got enough coin to keep walking. You lie to yourself so well it almost sounds reasonable, but in truth you're already committed the moment you follow him toward the smell of brine and tar and cheap rum. The docks are alive with shouting men and swinging ropes, crates crashing, seagulls screaming like they know what's coming. You keep your eyes down and your shoulders hunched. You hope no one notices. You hope someone does. The ship doesn't look like freedom. It looks like rot and rust and rope, barely holding itself together. The sails are patched, the planks swollen with salt, the whole thing leaning just enough to suggest it survived more than it should have. You're shown below deck, or rather, shoved, and introduced to the galley, where your job is to not get in the way. No one asks your name. No one asks your age. One man spits when he sees you. Another squints and mutters, "Hope she's not a bleeder." You pretend not to hear. It won't help you if you do. There's no corner of the ship that's safe. No time of day when you can fully relax. You learn to keep a blade tucked in your boot, though you're not convinced you could use it. You learn to sleep with one eye open, to eat fast, to laugh at jokes you don't understand, just to avoid standing out. You clean vomit, blood, piss, and worse from the deck without complaint. You try to make yourself useful, invisible, forgettable. But a woman on a pirate ship is never forgotten. She's catalogued, studied, whispered about. Your usefulness is not in question, only what form it will take. One night, the captain calls you to his quarters. You've never spoken to him before. He's not the yelling sort, more dangerous because of it. Calm, unreadable, the kind of man who lets others do his violence. He offers you rum, which you decline, and then he offers you protection. The price is clear, you say nothing. He shrugs and dismisses you. The next day, your work is doubled. The day after that, a pair of boots you were drying go missing. Then your knife, then your blanket. The message is subtle, but effective. There are no safe refusals here. Still, you try to make it work. What else is there? You haul rope, scrub the sides, patch sails, and try not to scream when the salt gets into your blisters. You bleed through your clothes and wash them at night when no one's watching. You keep track of who watches you and for how long. You learn their rhythms, their tempers, their hungers. You do not feel strong. You feel eroded, a cliff face being chipped away by waves that never stop. But you're still standing. For now. You overhear one of the men joking about throwing you overboard for bad luck. Another says you're worth more than a cutlass in Nassau if you're delivered in decent condition. They laugh, but it's not a joke. You realise not for the first time that you're not a person here. You're cargo, you're leverage. You're a story someone else will tell to prove how hard their life used to be. You wish you were surprised. The cook, the same one who brought you aboard, stops meeting your eyes. He avoids you now, speaks in grunts, and leaves your share of the food where others can take it. You ask him once if he regrets bringing you. He snorts and says, "You're not the first mistake I've made, and you won't be the last." That night, someone pisses in your water barrel. You drink it anyway. You don't want to give them the satisfaction. Days blur. The sea is vast and sickening. The sky's either blank or angry. You lose track of the ports you pass, the names of the islands, the count of the crew. A few vanish during storms. One falls during a raid. No one mourns. The dead are weightless here, forgotten as quickly as the emptied rum bottles. You begin to understand what they meant when they said the sea changes people. Not into monsters, just into something quieter, more hollow, easier to replace. You think about jumping. Once, maybe twice. You think about stealing a boat, slipping into the night, vanishing. But you're always watched. And even if you weren't, where would you go? The land is no kinder than the ship. The men on shore are no gentler. You've seen the way they look at girls who walk alone. You've been one. You know how the story ends, so you stay. Because staying feels like the least fatal option. Because the promise of something better still echoes, faint and cruel, in the back of your skull. Because no one told you the truth in time, that freedom for a woman like you was just another word for isolation. That pirates aren't rebels, they're merchants of suffering. That when you boarded the ship, you didn't escape your past. You just gave it new weapons. You don't decide to become a pirate. You simply run out of other choices. And once you're here, you learn the most important rule of all. Your body is no longer yours. It belongs to the sea. And the sea is never satisfied. The sea is not a mother. It does not cradle or forgive. It does not lift you gently into some new life. It takes without asking and without regret. You realise this almost immediately, when the ship rocks harder than you expect and your stomach turns to soup. The vomiting begins within the hour and doesn't stop for days. You retch until your ribs ache, until there's nothing left to bring up but bile and regret. The men laugh, of course. Some offer help in the form of mockery or unwanted touching. Others just step over you, where you're curled near the galley door, swaying with the ship, trying not to drown in your own spit. Your skin starts to peel within the first week. The salt in the air, the constant damp, the sun that somehow burns even when you can't see it, all of it conspire to flay you from the outside in. You chafe where cloth rubs raw against your thighs and under your arms. Blisters open and weep. In the tight quarters below deck, the air is thick with sweat, old fish, and something metallic that might be blood or rust or both. You can't tell anymore. Your nose has given up trying. You learn quickly that nothing on this ship is clean. The barrels of water are cloudy with growth, the food crawling with weevils and worse. Rats run freely, chewing through sacks of flour, and sometimes through each other. You hear them at night, squeaking, fighting, mating, a constant living background to your nightmares. You try not to think about what their droppings are landing on. You try not to think about how many are crawling above your hammock when you sleep. You're not a sailor. Everyone reminds you of this. You don't know the rigging, don't know the knots, don't know how to read the wind or the clouds or the captain's face. You're given the worst jobs, and even then, only grudgingly, scrubbing the deck with seawater that strips the skin from your hands, cleaning the chamber pots for men who don't see the need to aim, hauling rotted ropes soaked with the stench of old rain and mildew. You do it all silently, because to complain would be to invite attention, and attention is rarely kind. The crew has a hierarchy, and you're not in it. They don't see you as part of the ship. You're something extra, a weight they tolerate out of inertia or boredom, or the vague promise that you might yet be useful in ways you'd rather not consider. Some of them leer when they speak to you. Some grab when they think no one's looking. Others don't even wait for privacy. A slap on the backside, a grope during a passing lurch, a hand trailing too low when you reach for a rope. You tell yourself you'll stab the next one. You don't. You know what would happen if you did. Your name, if they ever learned it, is gone now. You've become the girl, the wench, the whole. You're described in terms of what you lack: strength, skill, manhood, or what you have that they can take. When they talk about you, it's as though you're already dead, a thing that's rotting just a bit more slowly than the ship. You try to disappear into the woodwork, but wood doesn't bleed. You do. You try to help in small ways, patch sails with torn fingers, bail water during storms, hold the wheel when everyone else is too drunk or asleep or bleeding. But every time you do something right, it only invites more suspicion. A woman who pulls her weight is a threat. A woman who doesn't is a burden. There's no version of you they'll accept. You're a paradox they'd rather throw overboard. And yet you remain. Not because they want you, but because you haven't tipped the balance yet. Haven't made yourself troublesome enough to be worth the effort of killing. You live in the narrow space between nuisance and necessity, one step too far in either direction, and you'll find out how deep the ocean really is. Sometimes you look over the edge of the ship and wonder what would happen if you jumped. Not with drama, not with screams or flailing arms, but quietly, deliberately, like dropping a pebble into a well. You imagine sinking, the cold wrapping around your ankles, the silence flooding your lungs. It feels cleaner than the life above the surface. But you don't jump. You don't even lean. Because something inside you, not hope, not courage, just sheer stubbornness, refuses to give them the satisfaction. The ship itself groans like it's in pain. Every creak and shudder feels like a warning. You lie in your hammock and wonder which board will fail first, which storm will peel the hull like a rotten fruit. You imagine the mast snapping, the sails tearing loose, the whole thing tipping sideways into the black. Part of you hopes it happens. Not for the escape. You've stopped believing in those, but because it would be fair. It would be just. Everyone else would go down with you. But the ship holds, barely. Because even the sea doesn't seem interested in ending things quickly. It wants to drag it out, wants to see how much can rot before it finally breaks. You stop bleeding after a while. No one notices. Or maybe they do, and they're just waiting to see what it means. You lose weight, lose hair, lose the thread of conversations around you. You start to forget the names of the men you sleep near. You stop dreaming. You stop crying. There isn't time for either. The sky never changes, always grey or blinding or black. You long for the smell of dirt, for the creak of a door on dry hinges, for the sound of anything that isn't water and wood and swearing. You would give anything to feel solid ground, even if it meant being buried in it. But there is no land, only horizon, and still you scrub, and still you carry, and still you flinch when footsteps approach too fast. You keep going, because not going means stopping, and stopping means you've lost. You don't know what you're winning exactly, maybe just the right to suffer one more day. No one has thrown you overboard yet, but it's not because you're safe. It's because you haven't given them a good enough reason. Not yet. And if the sea had any say in it, it wouldn't have let you on board in the first place. You'd imagine something different. Not glory exactly, but control, purpose. A sense of weight in your limbs, like you belong to your body for once, instead of just occupying it while men pass judgment. You thought the violence might make you feel strong, or at least less powerless. But piracy doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like chaos soaked in salt and blood and burning wood. When the shouting starts and the signal goes up, it doesn't feel like battle. It feels like panic with a job to do. You're handed a blade, not because they trust you with it, but because they don't care if you lose it or yourself in the fray. The metal is dull, the handle sticky with old sweat. You don't know how to hold it properly. No one teaches you. That's not the sort of thing they bother with for someone like you. The command comes to board, and you're pushed forward with the others, stumbling over the rail and onto a ship that still smells of lemon oil and merchant silk. It's cleaner than yours, nicer, the kind of place people once worked for wages instead of fear. The screaming begins before your feet even hit the deck. It comes from everywhere, above, below, inside your own ribs. The two crews collide like dropped barrels, hard and awkward and loud. You see a man swinging a cutlass at another man's head. You see a boy trying to hide under a coil of rope. You see blood on the wall, fresh and impossibly bright. And then someone rushes at you, and you forget everything except that your arm is moving, and your hand is holding something sharp. The blade enters with more resistance than you expect. It isn't like cutting meat on a plate. It's more like pushing into a sack of soaked grain. Thick, slow, messy. You aim for the chest but hit low, somewhere in the soft part of his belly. He makes a sound, wet and surprised, like someone exhaling through a mouthful of porridge. His eyes go wide, his hands clutch at you, and for one sickening moment, you're holding each other like dancers. Then he falls, dragging you with him, your knife still buried in his side. He doesn't die right away. That's the part that stays with you. He wheezes. His mouth works around words that don't come. Then finally, he whispers for his mother. Not a woman's name, not a wife, or a daughter, or a saint. Just the word mother, like he's 5 years old and scared in the dark. You don't know what to do. You press your hand to the wound, not to help, just to feel something solid under your palm. His blood is hot, and it seeps through your fingers with slow insistence, like it belongs to you now. You sit there too long. The fighting has moved past you. Someone shouts your name, or maybe just the word move, and you flinch like you've been struck. You pull the knife free. The body twitches, you gag. You crawl away and find a corner between crates that are already being looted. You vomit into your lap, and no one stops to check if you're wounded. A man steps over your legs, dragging a crate of tobacco. Another slaps you on the back like you've just been baptized. They strip the body within minutes, not just of valuables, those go quick, but of boots, coat, belt, anything that might be worth a trade. One of the men jokes about cutting off the ears to keep count. Another says something about the man's mother again, and everyone laughs. You stay silent. You press your face into your sleeve and try to breathe through the sour smell of blood and bile. You don't remember standing up. You just remember the cold realization that there will be more. That this wasn't a mistake or a crisis. This was the job. When the crew returns to your ship, they're giddy with violence. They brag about their kills, exaggerate their wounds, compare the sizes of their plunder. Someone tries to hand you a silver ring, taken from a hand you saw twitching. You don't take it. He shrugs and pockets it himself. Another man calls you blooded, like it's an initiation, like now you're real. You nod, because anything else might be fatal. You clean yourself with salt water and a scrap of cloth. It doesn't help. The blood is gone, but you can still smell it. In your nose, in your mouth, under your fingernails. You try to sleep that night, but every time you close your eyes, the man's face swims up, pale, wide-eyed, asking for something you couldn't give. You press your head into your hammock and whisper that he would have done the same to you. Maybe he would have, maybe not. It doesn't matter anymore. The next morning, no one mentions it. Not the kill, not your reaction, not your stench. They've already moved on. There's a new course set, a new wind, new sails to patch. You try to do your work, but your hands shake. You cut yourself on a splinter and don't flinch. Pain feels normal now. Expected, almost welcome. You start counting the raids, not aloud, not visibly, just in your head. This was the first. There will be more. You know that now. You'll kill again. It will get easier. They say it always does. That's what frightens you the most. Not the blood, not the bodies, but the quiet certainty that one day you won't throw up afterward. One day you'll step over the dying without blinking. One day you'll laugh when someone jokes about cutting off ears. You'd thought piracy would feel like power, but power requires choice. And there's none of that here. Only reaction, only survival, only doing what you must so the others don't decide they're tired of keeping you around. You killed a man. You'll carry that with you. But you also lived. That's the trade. It's not fair. It's not noble. It's not even surprising. It's just what the job demands. You tried to pass as a boy when you first boarded. Bindings, silence, the usual tricks. It might have fooled them for a day, maybe two, but you're not sure it mattered. Some of them likely knew from the beginning and just didn't say anything. Others figured it out over time and chose not to care, so long as you worked and kept quiet. It was a fragile kind of pretending, and it bought you time. But that time has run out. It happens in the middle of the night, when the ship is still except for the creak of the rigging and the soft slap of waves against wood. You're half asleep, wrapped tight in your hammock, already bracing against the cold that seeps in just before dawn. Then you feel it, a hand on your thigh, then another, rooting around with the lazy confidence of someone who's never been told no. You go still. You don't breathe. You wait for it to stop. It doesn't. You lash out before you think, elbowing hard, and the body retreats with a grunt. There's muttering. Footsteps. A laugh. You don't know who it was. That's the worst part. It could have been any of them, and it won't be the last time. In the morning, they're all looking at you a little differently. Not hostile yet, not openly, but curious, weighing you, measuring something. Like the secret's out. And now, you're just a question of logistics. The jokes start again, but they're meaner now, cruder, less hypothetical. You're not just a wench or a bit of fluff. You're the bitch. Your pocket wife. You're a disruption. A threat to the fragile, rotting order they've built around sweat and violence. Some of them talk like you're dangerous. Others like you're contagious. The rest treat you like food gone off. Still technically edible, but only if you're desperate and don't care what happens next. The work gets worse. You're given the heaviest ropes, the dirtiest buckets, the hardest shifts. Any mistake becomes a cause for mockery or punishment. You're shouted at twice as often and thanked half as much. When someone else breaks something, it's your fault. When something goes missing, it's assumed you took it. They don't even wait for proof. Just the assumption is enough. Sometimes they test you. Little things at first. A comment, a nudge, a hand that lingers too long on your back. You flinch and they smile. You ignore it and they escalate. You threaten them and they laugh. You report it to no one because there is no one to report it to. The captain doesn't care. And the first mate seems to enjoy watching you squirm. You learn quickly that resistance is a performance, not a solution. It buys you moments, not safety. You try different strategies. You play along once or twice, thinking that maybe if you smile at the right time or laugh at the right joke, they'll see you as less of a target. But that just invites more. They take your laughter as consent, your silence as compliance, your discomfort as a challenge. So you try the opposite. You go cold, hard, you keep your face blank and your voice flat and your knife close. That works for a while, until someone decides you're being uppity and you're knocked down during a storm, then accidentally kicked while on the floor. You try to disappear, to fold yourself into the background, to become so small and silent that you're not worth noticing. But invisibility is hard on a ship, especially when your body betrays you with every step. The shape of your chest, the curve of your hips, the monthly blood you try to hide with rags and ocean water. There's no room for secrets here. The walls are too thin, the space too tight. Everyone knows everything eventually. The older ones, the ones who've seen too many ports and too few consequences, start to treat you like currency. You overhear a conversation one night where your name isn't used, but the meaning is clear. One man says you're not worth the trouble. Another says you'd fetch good coin in certain harbours. A third just grunts and says, "She's still breathing, ain't she?" You leave before you hear the rest. You don't want to know how the vote ends. Your allies, if they exist, are silent. A younger sailor who once shared food with you now won't meet your eyes. The cook, the one who got you aboard in the first place, tells you quietly that he can't protect you anymore. Not that he ever did. It's not personal, he says, as if that makes a difference. You thank him because it's easier than screaming. One day you catch sight of yourself in the reflection of a still water bucket. You barely recognise the face looking back. Hollow cheeks, cracked lips, a bruise spreading over one cheekbone, like mould on bread. Your eyes look tired, yes, but more than that, resigned. You're no longer waiting for things to get better, just waiting to see how much worse they'll get. You wonder sometimes what would have happened if you'd never come aboard, if you'd stayed in the port town, scraping by with dirty laundry and bruised knees. You know it wouldn't have been better, just different, quieter maybe, more contained, the danger more familiar. But you also know that this is the life you have now. Not because you chose it, but because no one ever gave you real choices to begin with. Now you are not novelty. You are not mystery. You are not a story worth telling or a secret worth keeping. You are a problem to be solved, a source of tension, a disruption to the chain of command. You are not a sailor. You are not crew. You are not even human some days, just a complication with breasts and a mouth and too much bad timing. You are tolerated, barely, and only because no one's decided the risk of keeping you outweighs the effort of throwing you overboard. Not yet. They never show this part. In the stories, the ship is always grand. The sails are crisp, the sea is blue. The pirates are charismatic rogues with good teeth and witty dialogue. You've seen those plays or heard those tales whispered in ports, the ones with laughter, gold and innuendo. But they never mention what happens to your gums, how they swell and turn dark, how they bleed every time you chew, until you start swallowing mouthfuls of salt and blood and hoping it's your own. You avoid smiling, not because you're grim, but because your teeth are beginning to loosen in your skull. They don't mention the fleas either, or the lice, or the strange grey bugs that seem to live in the seams of your shirt. You try to crush them when you find them, but they always return, always more. They crawl across your stomach at night. You scratch until you bleed, then scratch again, because the itching never stops. Your skin becomes a map of welts and open wounds. You stop caring. So does everyone else. There's no one aboard who isn't infested with something. Your hair, once something you tried to hide under scarves and bindings, has turned into a nest. You haven't washed it in weeks. There's no fresh water to spare, and even if there were, the sea air would undo it within hours. It mats against your scalp, heavy and sour. You cut it off one night with a rusted blade, piece by piece, and leave the clumps drifting overboard like dead seaweed. No one notices. Or if they do, they don't say anything. They've stopped pretending to see you as anything human enough to comment on. You develop sores between your thighs from walking in wet linen every day. The salt rubs your skin raw. You try drying your clothes, but the air is never truly dry. And even when the sun comes out, the crew takes your spot on the lines. Your clothes stay damp. Your skin stays broken. You walk like a wound trying to hold itself together. One of the men calls you duck-legged. Another just grins and waits for you to collapse. The food is not food. It's hardtack crawling with worms. It's pork that smells like vinegar and farts. It's beans so salted they burn your throat. And when that runs out, it's whatever they can steal, fish, or scrape from the hull. You eat because you have to, not because it fills you. You vomit often, sometimes from the food, sometimes from the motion, sometimes from nothing at all. You've forgotten what hunger feels like without nausea attached to it. The water is worse. Stored in barrels that have gone green and slimy, it tastes like iron and rot, and the inside of your own mouth after a night of fever. Sometimes it has things floating in it. Sometimes it doesn't. You drink it anyway. Dehydration comes faster than disease. You've seen what happens to the ones who stop drinking. They shrivel. They die. The crew throws them overboard without a prayer. You sleep with a knife under your shirt. Not because it makes you feel safe, it doesn't, but because not having it makes you feel worse. You never use it. You think about it often. Imagine it in your hand. Picture the angle, the force, the blood. You don't trust yourself not to use it on the wrong person, or yourself. So you leave it tucked close, like a superstition. A reminder that you still have the right to say no, even if no one else cares. Sleep doesn't come easily. The noise, the cold, the stink of bodies too close for comfort. It all conspires to keep you half awake at all times. You flinch at footsteps. You jolt awake at sudden silences. You've learned to tell the difference between drunken stumbling and deliberate walking. You've learned to tell when a creak means weather and when it means trouble. You've learned to lie very still and pretend to be dead, just to be left alone. You don't speak much anymore, not because you're afraid, that passed weeks ago, but because it feels pointless. Most of the crew only talks to bark orders or share filthy jokes. You nod, you keep moving, you make yourself small. When someone does call your name, you jump, because it sounds foreign now. Not just because it's shouted, but because it no longer feels like it belongs to you. You've been her, that, it for so long that the word has lost its shape. There are no mirrors. If there were, you don't think you'd use one. You already know what you look like. You can feel it in your joints, your skin, the cracked edges of your fingernails. You look like someone who's lived too long in the company of rot. Someone hollowed out by salt and sweat and spite. Someone reduced. And the worst part is, this is normal. No one comments on the sores or the hair or the smell. No one pities you. They don't even mock you for most of it. That would require acknowledgement. They just accept it, as though this slow decay of body and mind is the expected baseline for survival. And maybe it is. There are still fights, still groping hands, still whispers in the dark, but the novelty of you has worn off. Now you're just a fixture. Not quite crew, not quite prisoner. You're a floating reminder of how cheap life is out here, a body that hasn't stopped moving yet. You've learned to carry your own weight and keep your own secrets. You've learned to live with pain like it's another limb. You've learned that every kindness costs more than it's worth. You once thought you'd be hardened by all this, that you'd come out of it sharper, tougher, something closer to a legend. But legends are for men who get to write their own stories. You don't feel hardened. You feel softened by rot, like wood left too long in water, splintered, soggy, ready to fall apart at the wrong touch. This is what they don't show in the dramas. The blood is always clean, the hunger always noble, the women always fierce and beautiful, and strangely well fed. No one ever has lice. No one ever bleeds through their trousers. No one ever wakes up screaming and finds they've bitten through their own tongue. You used to think that meant you were doing it wrong. Now you know better. You're doing it exactly the way it's done. There's a moment when you start to believe you might carve out a place for yourself here. Not safety, not respect, just a sliver of acknowledgement. Something more than the constant balancing act between invisibility and intrusion. You tell yourself that if you work harder, if you fight back, if you prove you're not just a liability, then maybe they'll stop treating you like a curse that hasn't drowned yet. You've already survived longer than they expected. That must count for something. So you speak up. Not often and never first, but when orders are barked and no one moves, you step forward. When a task needs doing, you take it. When a man starts shouting, you shout back. The first time you raise your voice above a mutter, it surprises even you. It earns you a shove and a bruise, but no one calls you bitch that day. It feels like progress. You volunteer for the boarding parties, not because you're good with a blade, you're still clumsy, still too slow, but because you need them to see you bleed for the same reasons they do. The first time, you take a slice to the thigh and limp back across the plank, soaked and dizzy. You pass out during clean-up. No one helps you to your hammock, but no one kicks you either. That's the closest thing to praise you get. The bruises accumulate faster than you can track. Your arms are yellow and blue. Your knees don't fully bend anymore. The scabs on your knuckles never get a chance to heal. You learn to wrap your ribs before raids, not to protect them, but to make sure you don't cry out when someone slams into you. The crew notices in a way. They don't say it, but the leering quiets a little. The groping doesn't, but the sneering gets edged with something closer to unease. You're not less vulnerable, you're just less predictable. Then one night, a man insults you and you insult him back. Too loud, too public. He laughs, then hits you so hard your vision blinks out like a snuffed lamp. You wake up with your arm bent wrong and your mouth full of blood. Later you realise your tooth is gone. You find it in your pocket, though you don't remember putting it there. You keep it for 2 days before throwing it into the sea. You don't cry, you don't scream, you just keep moving. Even with your arms splintered and bound to your chest, you try to work. You drag ropes with one hand. You hold buckets between your knees. You don't ask for help. You pretend the pain isn't there. And for that, they let you stay upright. They let you remain. It's not enough. So you escalate. You start listening more carefully, watching the power lines that run through the ship like rigging. Who talks to whom? Who flinches? Who obeys? You start thinking in terms of leverage. Not freedom, not justice, just weight. The kind that might tip something, even if it crushes you in the process. When you hear two men talking about the next raid, you file it away. When you see who's hoarding rum, you memorize the names. It's not about secrets, it's about timing. You speak to one man, then another. Quietly, privately. You suggest that the captain's getting sloppy, that the loot is being hidden, that he's trading with enemies, lies mostly. But they're plausible lies and that's enough. Desperation does the rest. The men are restless, hungry, dry. They want someone to blame. You offer them a direction. The plan doesn't even get close to working. Someone talks, or maybe someone was always planning to. You're dragged before the captain in front of the crew, not to be executed, but to be made an example. There's no speech, no verdict, just rope and salt, and the crack of leather against skin. They lash you 10 times, enough to tear, enough to bleed, not enough to kill. That would be wasteful. The punishment isn't for mutiny. Not really. It's for being irritating, for speaking when you weren't supposed to, for thinking you were important. The captain says nothing during the lashing. When it's over, he nods once, and they drop you in the corner like garbage that can't be thrown overboard just yet. You can't lie on your back for days. The wounds crust and break every time you move. No one helps you change the rags. You try to do it yourself, but the angle is wrong, and the cloth sticks to your skin like mould on wood. The pain doesn't feel sharp anymore. It's just part of the background. A low thrum, like the groan of the ship in bad weather. No one talks to you. Not to mock, not to jeer, not even to bark orders. You're beneath notice now, a risk, a fool, a reminder that trying too hard to matter only gets you punished. One of the younger men tosses you a crust of bread. You nod. He doesn't nod back. You stop trying to change anything. You still work, still move, still wake up and breathe and eat when there's food. But you do it like a machine now. Your voice grows quiet again. Your footsteps lighter. You forget what day it is, what island you're near, what name you used to go by before all of this. The bruises fade, the scabs fall away, the lesson remains. You understand your place now, not by where you sleep or how much work you're given, but by the absence of reaction. You've become background again, tolerated barely, like a loose board no one bothers to nail down. So long as you don't squeak too loud, they'll leave you where you are. You try to matter. What you learned is that mattering makes you a target. That visibility is dangerous. That ambition gets punished, not rewarded. You learned the rules. You won't forget them again. It doesn't begin with a dramatic collapse or a red rash or a scream from the galley. It starts with a cough. Dry, persistent, barely worth noticing at first. You think maybe it's the salt air or the damp, or the mould growing quietly in the creases of your hammock. You've been cold before, sick before, worse before, so you ignore it. You swallow hard, spit red into the sea when no one's watching, and keep moving. You work slower, you sweat more, but you still move. That's what matters. The cough doesn't go away. It deepens, settles into your chest like a barnacle. When you breathe, it crackles. When you lie down, it rumbles like thunder in your lungs. Sleep becomes shallower, the dreams more fevered. You wake in a sweat that smells wrong, sweet and sickly, like rot wearing perfume. Someone complains about the stink. You pretend not to hear. You already know it's you. The diarrhea comes next, sudden and merciless. It doesn't even give you time to feel embarrassed. Your body simply turns traitor and empties itself in the corner of the hold while you grip the wall, trying not to fall. You clean it up yourself. No one helps, no one mentions it, but afterward you notice the way they step around you, the way they leave a little more space at the bench, the way the looks change, not pity, not even disgust, just calculation. You're becoming a variable, a risk. Your legs start to give out after 3 days. Standing feels like climbing a mast with stones in your boots. You try to haul a rope and drop it. Try to carry a bucket and fall. The floorboards bruise your knees, your elbows, your ribs. Everything aches in deep, grinding ways. It feels like your bones are softening, like the sea is getting into you through your skin. You lose track of how long you've been sick. The days bleed into one another. Sunlight and starlight and storm clouds all passing over your face without meaning. You're moved, not to a cabin or a bed, of course, just to the least trafficked corner of the hold. Someone tosses you a threadbare blanket. Another leaves a cup of stale water beside your head. No one speaks to you directly. They're giving you space the way one gives a dying animal space to expire in peace. You're still alive, but only technically. Alive the way a splinter is still in the wood. The fever spikes on the 5th night, or maybe the 10th. You've stopped counting. It comes in waves. One moment you're freezing, teeth chattering so hard they feel loose in your gums, and the next you're burning, tearing off your shirt and gasping for air in the Caribbean heat. You scratch your own arms, bloody trying to get cool. You hallucinate rats chewing through your belly. You see your mother, though you don't remember her voice. You think someone stands over you once watching. Maybe, maybe not. You wake in filth, not just the sweat and blood and vomit, but everything else your body's decided to expel without warning. You smell yourself and gag. You try to sit up and nearly black out. Someone has stolen your food ration, not that you could have kept it down, and your water is gone. You lie back down, not because you want to, but because you can't do anything else. You're too weak to crawl. too dizzy to beg, too exhausted to care. You start to wonder if this is it, not the grand death you feared, not a blade or a noose or a plank, just this slow disintegration. No audience, no closure, no last words, just fading into the wood of the ship like rot. It doesn't seem like a bad ending, all things considered. Quiet, undemanding, maybe even fair. You wonder if it will hurt when it happens. You wonder if you'll know. You wonder if anyone will notice. But dying would be too kind, and the sea isn't in the business of kindness. Instead, the fever breaks, not all at once and not cleanly. You sweat it out in ragged shivers, coughing up what feels like pieces of your lungs. You stop seeing things. You start hearing again. Your limbs regain weight, though they still shake when you try to lift them. You're starving, nauseous, shaking with cold, but not dead. Not yet. Someone tosses you a crust of bread. It hits your chest and falls to the floor. You crawl after it and eat it in silence, dirt and all. You don't say thank you. You don't look up. You don't even know who gave it to you. It doesn't matter. Gratitude is a luxury, and you haven't earned your place back yet. When you try to stand, your legs don't hold. The second time, they do. You stagger to the deck, lean against the railing, and breathe in the salt like it's something sacred. It still burns, still makes you cough, but it fills your lungs. That's enough. That's survival. You're not welcomed back. There's no return. You're still marked, not by scars, but by memory. The crew saw you sick, helpless, weak. They saw you at the edge, and that's not something they forget. You're not feared, you're not respected, but you're avoided, and sometimes that's better. You clean yourself in the sea bucket. You scrub until your skin peels. You tie your hair back with a strip of old cloth. You fix your clothes as best you can, stitch by trembling stitch. You try not to look like someone who nearly died in the dark. You try to walk like you still belong. It doesn't work. They see through it. They always do. You recover, if you can call it that. Your limbs stop trembling. Your skin grows back in patches. You can stand without collapsing and eat without vomiting, which counts as progress. But you're not whole. You're worn thinner now, stretched tighter, like fabric that's been wet too many times and is ready to tear. You don't trust your body, and it doesn't trust you. You think maybe the worst has passed, that you've endured the sickness, the hunger, the silence, but the sea isn't done with you yet. It's never done. What comes next isn't a fever. It's a storm. It begins as a smudge on the horizon. Nothing unusual, just another bruised patch of sky behind the rigging. You've seen storms before, watched the crew prepare for them with practiced hands and sour expressions. But this one builds too fast. The clouds roll in like they've been summoned, heavy and low, dark enough to stain the water. The wind shifts direction with a sudden snap, carrying the cold stink of something old and patient. You feel it in your chest before anyone calls the alarm. A tightness, a pressure, like the sea is holding its breath. When it hits, it doesn't ask permission. The rain comes sideways, sharp as gravel, driven by a wind that howls through the sails, like it's screaming, just to be cruel. The ship lurches, then shudders, then starts to rise and drop in long, sickening waves. The deck becomes a trap, slick, shifting, impossible to trust. Men scramble, ropes snap, a sail tears loose like paper, and the mast groans once, twice, then gives, with a sound like bone breaking underwater. You don't wait for orders. No one gives them anyway. The chain of command disintegrates somewhere between the thunderclap and the first man going overboard. You grab what rope you can find, lash yourself to the rigging with hands that barely work from cold and fatigue. You tighten the knot around your waist and wedge yourself near the mast where you think the wood is least likely to split. Your hair whips into your mouth. Salt blinds you. You taste blood. You don't care. The ship tilts hard, and for one long endless moment, you're sure this is it. The angle too steep, the waves too tall, the sky too angry to let you come out the other side. You don't scream, you don't sob. You just shut your eyes and pray. not because you believe anyone is listening, but because the words are still buried somewhere inside you. You try to remember the prayers from childhood, the ones you used to whisper over stolen bread and bruised knees. You forget the endings, you say them anyway. Men fall. Some disappear into the water without a sound. Others scream for help no one can give. You watch one man cling to the side of the ship until the wood tears away and takes him with it. Another is crushed beneath a swinging boom, his leg folding the wrong way. No one tries to save him. There's no time. There's no footing. There's only the storm and what it takes. You feel something crack nearby, maybe part of the hull, maybe part of yourself. And then you're drenched in a wave so heavy it knocks the breath out of you. You hold on. Your hands are bleeding, but you hold on. You don't think of death. You think of splinters, of rope burns, of the bitter taste of seawater forced down your throat. You think of the sound the sails made as they tore free. You think of nothing else. The storm lasts for hours or minutes or years. You can't tell. The sky flashes again and again, but the thunder has grown too loud to register as separate. It's all one long sound now. Wet, heavy, endless. Your arms are numb. Your legs cramp. You bite your tongue to stay awake. You dream while standing, hallucinate through the wind. You forget what calm feels like. And then, as suddenly as it began, the storm passes. The clouds break. The sea levels. The light returns. Not warm, not welcoming, just present. You're still lashed to the rigging, soaked and half conscious. Your skin wrinkled and salt-burned. Your lips cracked open. You try to speak, and nothing comes out. You cough instead, and it hurts. You're not the first to move. Others untie themselves, stumble across the ruined deck, take stock. There are fewer voices, fewer bodies. The survivors don't talk much. There's nothing to say. You step over broken boards, torn sails, limbs that may or may not still be attached to their owners. You find a hand clutching rope with no body in sight. You look away. Supplies are ruined. The food that wasn't swept away is soaked or smashed or turning black. The water barrels, the ones that didn't crack open, are tainted with salt or something worse. You find one barrel still sealed, force it open with your knife, and recoil at the smell. Something crawled in and drowned, weeks ago, by the stink of it. The crew drinks it anyway. You do too. There's no choice. The bilge is ankle deep in filth. You help bail it out. No one asks you to, but no one stops you either. You find a bloated corpse wedged under a broken beam. Too waterlogged to move, too human to ignore. You wade in, tug it free, drag it to the edge, and roll it into the sea. It floats for a moment before tipping under. You watch it go. You don't blink. The captain is alive. He has a broken nose and 2 missing fingers. He gives no speech, no orders, just a look, hollow and grim, before disappearing into what's left of his quarters. The first mate is gone. You're not sure anyone noticed until now. You huddle near the stove that night, trying to dry your clothes and your skin and whatever is left of your nerves. The fire is weak, barely more than embers. It takes hours for the shaking to stop. No one talks, no one sings. The ship creaks around you, resentful but still floating. You stare at the wall and think about how easily it could have ended. How quickly the sea could have swallowed all of you. How it still might. You're not grateful to be alive, just surprised. It feels like a mistake, like the sea missed a step. You should have been one of the ones thrown overboard, or crushed, or swept cleanly into silence. But you're still here, breathing, sore, tired. Worse than before, but not finished. You make port after 13 days of sluggish wind and silence. Just enough breeze to keep you moving. Just slow enough to make you wish it would stop altogether. The sails sag more often than they fill. The deck creaks. The island appears by degrees and slow, humid, inevitable, smelling of fruit, heat, and things trying not to rot. The sails are patched from the storm. The crew stitched together with the same desperation. You're all ghosts now, sunburned, hungry, twitchy from too many near deaths in too few weeks. But land means food, land means coin, land means something different. For just a moment. At least, that's what you tell yourself. The orders come down simple and flat. Half the crew stays aboard to make repairs, half goes ashore to handle trade. You're listed among the latter. No explanation, no discussion. Someone hands you a short list of goods to barter, a handful of items wrapped in damp cloth. Trinkets and scrap, and probably stolen things they couldn't sell anywhere else. You're told to walk the docks, to talk to vendors, to be useful. No one offers to go with you. No one looks you in the eye. You get through half the list before you realise they're not coming back. At first you think you've misunderstood. Maybe there was a delay or a shift in plans. You wait at the rendezvous point for hours, a crooked piling at the edge of the dock, half shaded by rotting netting. The sun moves, the tide rises. Other sailors pass you by, drunk, busy, bleeding. None of them are yours. You ask a boy to watch your things and jog down to the harbour's edge. The water's calm. There's no sign of your ship. Just an empty stretch of horizon, wide and shimmering, and one or two pinpricks too small to be familiar. You stand there longer than you should. When you finally ask a local to describe the ship that left this morning, low-slung patched sails, limping, he nods and says it pulled anchor before dawn. He doesn't know its name. He doesn't need to. You do. You recognise the description. You feel it like a punch in the stomach. Not sudden, not shocking, just inevitable. They didn't even leave a message. You go back to the dock. Your things are gone. The boy's gone too, which is probably for the best. You don't have it in you to be angry. Anger requires expectation. You don't know what you expected. Maybe not kindness, but something. A signal, a warning, a hint. Instead, they just left. Because you weren't a risk worth keeping anymore. Or maybe because you were too much of one. You wander the market dazed and hoarse. You trade one of your knives for bread that's mostly mould. You swallow it anyway. You try to sell your boots, but they're too worn. You try to sell your shirt, but the shopkeeper looks at you and says, "No thanks, I'm not interested in that sort of thing." You don't ask what sort of thing he means. You already know. The locals see what you are, not a sailor, not a pirate, not even a thief worth hiring, just a woman, alone, sunburned and bruised, clothes that don't fit, hands that shake, eyes that don't look up. You carry your trauma like a stench. No papers, no crew, no currency. You're not useful. You're not trustworthy. You're a liability they can't even arrest. You try to find another ship. You ask around at the taverns, near the warehouses, down by the loading docks. You offer to clean, cook, carry. They laugh. One man asks what else you're willing to do. You don't answer. He shrugs and walks off. Another says he'd consider it if you had references. You laugh at that one. It comes out wrong, more like a cough. You don't try again. You sleep under a canoe propped on bricks behind a shed. You use your coat for a blanket. It smells like mildew and old fish. You dream of being at sea again, but not the storms, just the quiet, the sway, the steady rhythm of something larger than you, indifferent but dependable. You wake sore and hungrier than before. Someone's stolen the crust of bread from your pocket. You don't even remember falling asleep with it. You try to scrape together passage, a favour, a lie, a bit of charm. Nothing works. Everyone here wants something you no longer have. Youth, beauty, strength, illusion, all gone. What's left is harder to sell. You don't blame them. You wouldn't hire you either. There's a brothel near the docks and you stand outside it for a long time, not thinking, just watching. The women there are painted, practiced, dressed in threadbare silk and confident sarcasm. They laugh like they're on fire. You see the way the men treat them. Hands grabbing, voices slurring, coin tossed like scraps. It doesn't look worse than piracy. It just looks familiar. You take one step toward the door, then stop. You're not ready to be used that openly again. Not yet. You steal a bit of rope from a drying rack. Not for anything really, just to have. You keep it looped in your coat pocket. The way others might keep a charm or a coin, it gives you weight, it gives you options. You don't plan anything, but you start to wonder what it would feel like to tie it to something steady, to lean into nothing, to disappear properly this time. Not forgotten, just erased. But the sea's still there. You see it in glimpses, between buildings, behind sails, curling like a promise you know better than to believe. You can't go back to it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But you can't leave it behind either. It did something to you, took something, gave something worse in return. You were a pirate, briefly. Not one of legend, not one for the songs. You didn't command ships or wield pistols or wear lace. You scrubbed decks and bled into the boards and killed a man who cried for his mother. Now you're not even that. Just another woman at port with too many scars and not enough story. And the worst part is, it still could have been worse. You last 8 days in the port before someone recognises you. Not from a wanted poster. There aren't any, not for people like you, but from memory. A sailor from another ship maybe. Someone who saw you during a raid or tied to the mast after a failed mutiny. He doesn't call you by name. He just says, "That one? I've seen her with the pirates." That's all it takes. You're arrested in the middle of the day, dragged out from behind a warehouse where you've been trying to rest in the shade. The guards don't ask for identification. They don't ask what ship you served on. They don't even ask whether you've committed a crime. They see the scars, the dirt, the face too thin to pass as innocent, and they make a decision. You're pirate adjacent. That's enough. There's no evidence. None of the looted goods from your crew are with you. You don't have weapons or coin or inked documents of affiliation, but you have salt in your hair and rope burns on your wrists and the posture of someone who's been yelled at for too long. You're taken to a holding cell made of splintered wood and rusted bars, and no one even tells you what the charges are until the trial begins. When they do, the accusations are absurd in their confidence. Piracy, obviously, but also theft, seduction, blasphemy, and general public indecency. You don't even flinch at that last one. You've heard worse. What stings is the certainty in their voices, the way they describe your life without knowing it. They say you were a mistress to the pirate captain, that you lured ships close with feminine wiles, that you poisoned men who didn't give you what you wanted. One of the guards says you smiled while cutting a man's throat. You barely have the strength to stay upright, let alone object. You ask for a chance to speak. The judge waves his hand, indifferent. He's not listening to you. He's listening to the sound of his own moral clarity, the echo of his robes rustling, the poetry of a sentence that has already been written. You try anyway. You tell the truth, that you boarded as a servant, that you worked the ropes, that you killed only once and only because you had to, that you didn't steal, that you didn't seduce anyone, that the captain never looked twice at you. The courtroom laughs, not loudly, not with cruelty, just with mild amusement, like they're hearing a child insist she didn't eat the jam. The story you tell isn't dramatic enough. It isn't sexy. It doesn't fit the image they've already decided on. Women who end up with pirates are whores or witches or lost causes. You don't look like a woman who held a blade. You look like a woman who got caught in the wrong story and didn't know when to shut up. The prosecutor calls you a disruptive female element, says you likely sowed confusion among the crew, implies that you were the real reason for any insubordination. You're painted as both temptress and traitor, too soft and too dangerous at the same time. They call you unnatural. Then they call you irrelevant. It doesn't have to make sense, it just has to stick. Your judge, a man who has never set foot on a ship in his life, calls you a tragic example of womanly weakness. He sighs as he says it, as if he's disappointed in you personally, as if you've let him down. He looks tired. Not with the case, but with the very idea of women who think they belong on ships. Let this be a warning, he says, to other girls who dream above their station. The sentence is death. He says it without emphasis, like he's finishing a list. You're taken back to the cell. It's dark now. the air thick with sweat and mildew. There's a crack in the wall that lets in a single shaft of moonlight, just enough to see the rats when they come. You lie down on a patch of straw that stinks of old piss and wait for the hours to pass. You try not to cry, not because it would be weak, but because it feels pointless. You've cried too many times already, for hunger, for pain, for humiliation. You're out of tears. A priest visits you the next morning. He's young, nervous, eager to do his duty. He calls you daughter and asks if you repent. You say nothing. He offers you absolution. You stare at the wall. He tells you God forgives even pirates. You think that's generous considering no one else has. He leaves a small wooden cross near your feet. You don't touch it. You think about escaping, but there's nowhere to go. Even if you got past the guards, even if you ran into the jungle, even if you stole a skiff, then what? You're still you. Still unwanted, still hunted, still carrying the face of someone the world has already erased. There's no freedom waiting on the other side of the wall, just more corners to sleep in, and more men who think your silence means yes. So you wait. You eat the bread they give you, dry and hard enough to chip a tooth. You sip the water that tastes like iron. You scratch the bug bites on your legs until they bleed. You lie awake and wonder how much of this story will be remembered. The answer, you suspect, is none of it. You were part of a ship. Then you were left. Then you were accused. Now you're condemned. That's the arc, that's all. They move you to a smaller cell the night before. It's closer to the gallows. Easier that way, logistically. The guards don't say much. One of them mutters a prayer under his breath. Another spits before locking the door. You don't bother asking for details. You already know what time it'll happen. Just before dawn, fewer spectators, fewer complications, fewer screams. Not that anyone would object to screaming. They just prefer it to be someone else's problem. The new cell is worse than the last. Smaller, colder, built from stone that seeps moisture into your bones. There's no window, just a thin vent cut near the ceiling. You can't see the sky, you can't see the gallows, but you can smell it. Rope, wood, sweat, and the sour stench of men who piss themselves in fear just before the end. The scent comes in waves, clinging to the damp like rot. You're not alone in the building. You hear the others, soft crying, coughing, the shuffle of feet too tired to pace. Someone sings, low and broken, a lullaby or a hymn, you can't tell which. You press your back against the wall and try not to breathe too deeply. You don't want to taste the air. Just before sunrise, someone else is hanged. You don't know who. Maybe a thief. Maybe another pirate. Maybe just someone the guards didn't like. There's no announcement, no ritual. Just footsteps, a clatter, a thud, and the sound of a body dropping through space. Then silence. Then a soft creak as the trapdoor resets. You feel your stomach twist. You curl into yourself and breathe through your mouth until the nausea passes. You don't sleep that night. Not really. You drift in and out, heart racing, thoughts tangled, limbs stiff. Every time you close your eyes, you imagine the rope, the sudden drop, the moment your breath stops. You don't imagine rescue. You don't imagine a pardon. Those are stories. You've lived too long to believe in stories. When the door opens, you don't move. 2 guards enter. One carries the rope, the other the hood. You try to stand and fail. Your legs won't listen. Your body has decided it would rather die here, curled up and shaking, than walk willingly into death. One of the guards sighs and grabs your arm. They drag you upright, and your knees buckle. You soil yourself. You don't apologize. They give you time to walk, if only because dragging you is more work. You do your best. Every step is a negotiation between fear and pride, though pride isn't worth much anymore. You keep your eyes down. You don't want to see the faces. You don't want to see the sky. You're not ready for it to be the last thing. The gallows are old, stained, weather-worn. You see the dark patches on the wood, where people died before you. Some of them are still wet. The crowd is small. Dock workers, soldiers, A priest with a thin book. No one cheers. No one boos. You're not important enough for drama. Just another execution on a morning that smells like tide and rain and something left too long in the sun. The noose goes around your neck. It's rough, scratchy, made from old hemp that scrapes your skin. The knot sits just behind your left ear, where it's supposed to snap the neck clean. You've seen it done wrong. You know what happens then? You hope the executioner knows what he's doing. You hope the rope holds. You hope it ends quickly. The hood goes on. It smells like sweat, mildew, and fear, decades of it soaked into the fabric. You gag on the scent. The world goes dark. You hear someone reading a statement, but you don't catch the words. They blur. Your hearing narrows. All you can make out is your own breathing, your own pulse, the creak of the wood under your feet. You wait for a storm, for a scream, for someone to cry out that you've been spared, that they made a mistake, that the king has had a change of heart. You know it's not coming, but you wait anyway. Not because you believe, just because the waiting is the only part you still control. And then it's over. The floor vanishes beneath you. For one terrible instant, you're suspended, not flying, not falling, just hanging in the space between the two. Then your body drops, the rope jerks, your neck snaps, or it doesn't. You won't know. Your legs kick once, your hands twitch, your body evacuates itself, and then stillness. You don't see anything after that. No light, no tunnel, no judgment. Just the slow fading of sensation, like a candle being pinched out between damp fingers. They don't mark your grave. There's no stone, no cross, no carved plank driven into the dirt. Just a pit behind the gallows, half covered with scrub and rotting leaves. The gravedigger says nothing as he drops you in. He doesn't know your name, and even if he did, he wouldn't waste his breath. You're one of several that day, a few more bodies to stack before noon. You land beside someone already half sunk into the earth, bones visible through shredded cloth. You do not look like you belong to the same story. You do. The records get your name wrong. One letter off, maybe two. The ink smears. The clerk writes female pirate in the margin and then draws a line through it. Another note below reads whore, probably, in smaller, meaner handwriting. No one verifies the details. No one cross-references with port logs or prison manifests. You're filed and then forgotten. Buried twice, once in dirt, once in silence. A few men who saw you die mention you later, in passing. One calls you the girl with the twitch. Another remembers the way your body jerked before going still. They don't mention your name, because they never learned it. They don't remember what you said because you didn't get to say much. To them, you were part of the scenery. The rope, the trap door, the shape that swung until it stopped moving. Someone asks if you cried. One man nods, another shrugs. It doesn't matter. Rumours start as they always do. In one version, you were the lover of the pirate captain, turned in by a jealous crewmate. In another, you disguised yourself as a boy and slit throats in your sleep. One version says you were pregnant when they hanged you. Another claims you laughed on the way to the scaffold. All of them are wrong, but wrong in different ways. The details change, but the assumptions stay the same. Women at sea must be mad or wicked or ruined. Anything else would be inconvenient. No one sings about you. You weren't Anne Bonny. You don't become myth. The ballads need colour, fire, something fierce to hum about in the dark. You were quiet, dirty, tired. Your story doesn't rhyme. It doesn't sell. You were never meant to be remembered, and so you aren't. The crew that left you behind continues on. They forget your name by the next port, or maybe they never knew it. You were a line item, a problem deferred. They drink, trade, plunder, lie. Some die, others disappear into the shoreline, swallowed by jungle or brothels or their own debts. A few are hanged years later in different towns with different judges. None of them mention you. There's nothing in it for them. The ship itself, that rotten beast you once called home, eventually sinks. Not in battle, not in glory, just poorly repaired, poorly handled, poorly cared for. It goes down. In a storm off the coast of somewhere nameless, some crew survives, clinging to wreckage and luck. Others don't. The wreck is never salvaged. It becomes part of the reef, wood picked over by crabs and swallowed by coral. Your old hammock sinks with it, along with everything else you carried. Back in the town where you were hanged, life goes on. New criminals arrive. New executions are scheduled. Your spot in the graveyard is covered by another body within days. The priest doesn't remember your confession because you didn't give one. The guards remember you only as weight. The gallows are cleaned, oiled, reused. The rope you swung from snaps 3 hangings later and is replaced without ceremony. No one writes down what you endured. No one records the hunger, the sickness, the ache in your bones when the sea pressed you into the boards. No one lists the bruises or the names of the men who took more than they were owed. No one writes about the day you killed someone and didn't want to, or the time you stitched your own leg shut with a fishhook and a prayer. Those details die with you, and with time even the lies disappear. The stories get shorter, simpler. A girl who went to sea, a woman who got what she deserved, an example, a warning, a shadow. Then not even that. There's no one left to ask the right questions, no one left to care. Years later, a boy playing near the gallows finds a bone. He shows it to his mother. She tells him to put it down. She doesn't want to know where it came from. He drops it. The rain comes, the soil shifts, the past slides quietly deeper underground. Centuries pass. The island changes hands. The old town burns, is rebuilt, is renamed. The gallows are dismantled. The execution records are lost in a flood. The pit becomes a garden. Grass grows where the bodies lay. No marker, no plaque, no hint of what was once beneath. You are gone, not just in body but in memory. No grave, no journal, no child to speak your name. Even the sea forgets you. The tide you watched so many times flows past your story without pause. The wind that whipped your face has no trace of you left in it. You dissolve, slow and quiet, like salt in warm water. You do not become a legend. You do not become a cautionary tale. You do not become anything. You were a girl who tried to survive a life that was never meant to keep you. You failed. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe surviving as long as you did was already a kind of defiance, but it didn't change anything. The world kept turning. The ships kept sailing. The gallows kept swinging. And you became a footnote. And then even that faded. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. If you're still listening, thank you for drifting through the splinters of this forgotten life, for standing on deck through salt and silence, for walking to the gallows with her, and for remembering someone the world chose to forget. If you'd like early access to more of these slow, sorrow-soaked histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to help keep this little corner of quiet storytelling going, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other overlooked lives you'd like to see brought back into the dim light. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chronicler, Andrew S. Sleep well.